Hello, this is Mr. Fay. As we mentioned earlier, every substance has its own density. And water is kind of cool because water really has a density of 1. In fact, the whole system is kind of based on the density of water. 1 gram of water has a volume of 1 cubic centimeter or 1 milliliter. So the whole system is kind of based on it. And objects that have densities greater than 1 will sink. So like a 1.1 or 1.9. 2.9, 16.8, any number larger than 1 is going to sink when you place it in the water. And that means sink all the way to the bottom. Now, some might sink quickly and some might sink slowly, but they will eventually all sink to the bottom with this density larger than 1. Objects with densities less than 1 will float. And remember, when things are floating in water, they can actually float differently from one another. So we'll chat about that in a little bit. That right there obviously would be an object that has a density less than 1, so maybe like a 0.4 or something like this. And down here, this yellow object would have a density greater than 1. So if we could say it's a painted aluminum ball, which would have a density of 2.7, so that would be a sinker. But we've got some other situations too. We can have objects that neither sink nor float. They just kind of hang out there in the middle. And we also can have objects that float higher or lower than other floating objects. So it gets a little bit more complicated. I'm going to step over to the board and see if we can talk about this a little bit. An object that neither sinks nor floats has a density of exactly 1.0. A lot of plastics will have a density of exactly 1, and actually the human body, together with the water that's in it, the air in your lungs, usually has a density of right around 1. That's why you kind of sink, kind of float. Depends on whether or not you take a deep breath, which will increase or decrease your body's volume. Now with these two things up here, you'll see that both of these are floating, but they probably have different densities. In fact, you can tell by looking at them that they definitely do. This density would be less, like maybe a 0.4 grams per cubic centimeter, while this one right here would probably be a little bit more, maybe like a 0.8 or 9 grams per cubic centimeter. Something that's relatively interesting is you can predict basically what its density is by the percentage of it that is above or below the water. You take a look at this, about 0.4 of that object, if that object were 1, okay, so about 40% of that object is actually below the surface of the water, which shows that it could have a density about 40% that of water. Same thing over here, we've got about 80% of this object below the surface of the water, and therefore that density is about 80% of 1, or 0.8. So again, if you're going to draw something floating in water, you need to realize that things are not going to float like this. They're going to have some degree of it below the water, and that degree that is below the water is dictated by what its density is. So again, anything that starts with 0, which is smaller than 1, is going to float, but they may float differently. Hopefully that has helped. Hope you have a good one. See ya.